To you who answered the call of your country and served in its armed forces to bring about the total defeat of the enemy, I extend the heartfelt thanks of a grateful nation. As one of the nation's finest, you undertook the most severe task one can be called upon to perform. Because you demonstrated the fortitude, resourcefulness, and calm judgment necessary to carry out that task, we now look to you for leadership and example in further exalting our country in peace. Harry Truman, President of the United States. Welcome to History with Smiley. We're at Crawford Museum in Covington, Kentucky for a very special series of speakers on World War II. Let's go inside and hear the stories from the veterans themselves of their experiences during World War II in the 1940s.
I'm Gary Johnston, President of the Board of Crawford Museum, and it's my privilege to welcome you here. And this is an inaugural part of the series. And I hope that you enjoy this very much. I hope that you tell your friends to come back to the very next one. I hope that all of you come to the November 11th Veterans Day ceremony here, the 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour, right here. Actually it'll be in the other room, but here at Behringer Crawford, it's going to be a very nice ceremony with Congressman Jeff Davis speaking, and the Mount Auburn Brass Choir will provide the music. It will be a very, very nice solemn ceremony honoring our veterans. It's my pleasure right now to introduce you not to our speaker, but to our assistant director, who is going to introduce the speaker. This is Chris Myman. Chris?
Parade of people who aren't speaking. I also want to welcome you all to the museum. This is very nice of you all to come out on a beautiful day with the Bengals playing, and it's very nice of you to all come out. I will also be introducing somebody who won't be speaking, so I'll go ahead and get along with that. Betty Lee Nordheim is the person who's put all this together, and she is the chairwoman of the Rotating Exhibits Committee, so please, Betty Lee Nordheim.
We had quite a time getting the exhibit together. The day before we would open, we opened on Saturday, Friday afternoon. It was, somebody called to talk to somebody else, and they said they can't talk because there was 16 people running around here like chickens with their heads off because we got too much to do. In the middle of this, I'm trying to eat and work with one hand, and this man came in. He thought, he was mixed up. He thought the exhibit opened that day. Well, he stood there and talked to me for about an hour, telling me about his experiences as a merchant mariner. And I said, you've got to come back and do a speech for you. And he was telling me why they were not known and all the things they did, and I think it's important for everybody to hear about that. So I would like to introduce Bill McCroskey.
Well, we were kind of hoping George Bush would show up to bring a little more crowd, but since he didn't, I think we'd have a great one here on it. In order to start it, I'm going to pass these to you to show you what my credentials are for being able to talk to you. There is a World War II memorial up in Washington. It is not just a veterans memorial, it is a World War II memorial. They want everybody of that generation to have their names entered into the archives up there. And it's very easy for you to do. I'll pass this out and show you how I'm entered into it. I put this in, and my wife also. You don't have to put the pictures in if you don't want to. They cost $10. They charge you $10 for the processing on it. But this is what I was doing during World War II. You can pass this around and then send them back to me. And that gives you a little idea of my background as to why I think I should talk to you and tell you what the Merchant Marine were actually doing during World War II. I'm going to start it off with the statement by Franklin Delano Roosevelt before he died. He says, "The mariners have written one of its most brilliant chapters. They have delivered the goods when and where needed in every theater of operation and across every ocean in the biggest, the most difficult, and most dangerous job ever taken." That was Franklin Delano Roosevelt before he died. He did not live long enough to complete the veterans package that he was going to give to the Merchant Marine. Because we didn't know it, but we weren't military. Nobody ever told us we weren't military. I enlisted in the U.S. Maritime Service, and all the recruiters ever told us, well, you know, you're going to deliver work on cargo ships. No movies were made of the Merchant Marine, because who wants to show pictures of a rusty old freighter or a tanker that's laying down in the water and things of that kind? There was one movie made, and I forget the name of it, North to Murmansk or something, had Humphrey Bogart in it. This thing was so far from reality that it was almost a comedy to view that. It had no relationship to what the Merchant Marine were actually doing during the war. No, as I say, we didn't hold guns or anything of the kind, or weren't supposed to. The Merchant Marine is strictly to carry cargo, to carry troops, to carry any material that was used during World War II. There were no long-range aircraft back then. There was no mid-air refueling. The only airplanes that were able to cross the ocean on their own were the bombers. And they would have to take off from the East Coast, usually from New Jersey, go up to Newfoundland, refuel, fly to Ireland, refuel, and then they could be dispersed into their theaters. These were the only airplanes that were able to cross the ocean on their own power. Any of the fighters, the other smaller aircraft, we took those over. We put them up on the decks, we took tankers, converted them, put the kind of a flight deck up on top, put the airplanes on there, got them across. Everything that was carried over, the troops, the food, the ammunition, everything went by Merchant Marine. The Navy did not carry this. There's a lot of misconception. People think, well, the Navy took all this. No, we took the stuff to the Navy. The torpedoes for their submarines, we carried their torpedoes. We carried the bombs for the bombers. We carried the food for the soldiers. We carried the soldiers over. Everything that moved was done by Merchant Marine. And this is what the folks don't realize. They think, oh, the Navy took all this stuff over. The Navy is strictly a combat force. They are to support you. They had, when we finally had convoys, they did have some escorts, very few of them. They had so few, that as I remember the first convoy that I was in, the escorts that we had were built in Canada. They were called destroyer escorts. They're much smaller than a destroyer. And they were built in Canada. We didn't even have enough of our own to provide any of the air cover or the convoy coverage. So how did they get us guys in there? I was living in Cincinnati at the time on Montana Avenue. At the end of the street was a big billboard that said, "Get quick action, join the U.S. Maritime Service." Well, here I am, 19, just turned 20, I have no family left, my parents are dead. Can you imagine anything that would appeal to anybody any more than that? Get quick action and that? Right away I went down and enlisted in the U.S. Maritime Service. Of course, when I went to the draft board, they said, it's probably a good thing you did, says, because we were going to draft you in 2 weeks anyway. So one way or another, I was going to get in there. But in this instance, I had a choice as to where I was going to go. And I could just envision traveling around the world and seeing all of these things out there. You know, that foot soldier out there, I didn't want any part of that. I thought the worst thing that could happen is I would be out there and it'd be time to eat and I'd have my mess kit out and it'd be raining. And that rain would hit my bread. Did you ever try eating soggy bread? No, I didn't want that. Being on board ship was what I thought was going to be the greatest thing in the world. So I signed up into the maritime service. They didn't tell us very much about what this was. In my instance, I went up to Hoffman Island in New York. This is the last island out in New York Harbor. At that time, the Germans were in such complete control of the whole Atlantic coast that we had submarine nets fastened from Hoffman Island to a tugboat out there to keep the submarines from coming up the Hudson River and shooting up all of the ships in New York City. This is how completely the Germans were controlling the Atlantic coast in 1942. Everything that we did was done as military. We were taught to march and all of this sort of thing, so we always thought we were part of the military. I had 4 weeks of training. They didn't have time to do much training with us. The only sea training I had was 3 days on the old yacht Vima, donated by Vanderbilt during the war. And that was on Long Island Sound, and that was to kind of give us a little bit of sea legs a little bit to know what we were going to do. Some got seasick, some didn't. But that was your exposure to going to sea. The conception that folks have of the Merchant Marine, many of them are thinking of these old sea dogs that were drunk all the time and things of that kind, 50, 60 years old. There were some of those at the start of the war. And this was really, I guess, what you'd call the backbone to have things moving at first. But there weren't enough of those for the job that was going to have to be done. Actually, everybody who became part of the Merchant Marine looked like this. This isn't my picture, but this is some that were taken of fellows up at Hoffman Island. This just shows what the average age probably was of everybody who is now going to become Merchant Marine. We were 19, 20 years old from all over the country. I remember some of them from Texas, every place. They brought them in, and the only place we had on the East Coast at that time was Hoffman Island. They would turn us out in 4 weeks. During that time, I chose to work on deck because, as I say, I was a naturally curious young man. I wanted to see what was going on. I didn't want to be stuck down in the black gang under there and not knowing what was going on. So you think, well, let's work on the deck. On the Liberty ship, there's one of them. The Navy couldn't absorb us. They wanted to, by the way, but there was 2 reasons they couldn't. First of all was this old gang of the Merchant Marine. The Navy didn't want any part of those. These guys were 50, 60 years old with no teeth, in bad health. A lot of them were drunks, things of that kind. So the Navy didn't want to take those in. They would have taken us. But to do that, they would have had to take this other bunch. So they said no, they didn't want any part of that. The original Merchant Marine is not government owned. All of these ships were owned by private companies like Light's Brothers, things of that kind, whatever their names were. They all owned ships. Well, now the only people who were equipped to continue to do this when they started building all these others were the same shipping companies. So actually, during the war, the tankers, the Liberty ships, the Victory ships, everything really was under private ownership on contract to the government. Nobody knew about this except us guys on board, because when we got a paycheck, it came from the shipping company. It didn't come from the U.S. government or the U.S. Maritime Service. It came from the shipping company, and that's how we knew which one of the shipping companies had actually owned the ship that we had just served on and were getting off of. So when we carried everything over there, including the soldiers, even if it was a big troop ship, it was still the Merchant Marine. The Navy did not operate this. We took the troops over. And they said, well, an army travels on its stomach. Well, that's true. But how did they get the stuff for their stomach? It was, by the way, I want to tell you, when I say me, I am talking for the Merchant Marine, not personally to get anything out of it. This was, everybody in the Merchant Marine was in the same fix. So we had to, you can't imagine the stuff that it takes to support the armed forces on foreign land. The different cargoes that we carried were amazing. We might have ammunition in that. There were 6 holds on one of these things. They might have ammunition in that one. This one might be full of beer. This one could be full of toilet paper, clothing, whatever it takes to support the armed forces was in the holds of cargo ships. They were not in the holds of Navy ships. As I say, we supplied the Navy. Now, early in the war, there was no armament on merchant ships, but they decided there should be. After all, we were going to have to maybe defend ourselves. And this is all the merchant is all their guns are for defensive purposes, not for offensive purposes. So some of the people in their wisdom, the first ship I was on was an oil tanker that we had confiscated from the Italians when it was in port over here. Well, now this thing wasn't quite big enough to want to do overseas travel with it, so they decided they were going to use this ship to run coastal stuff, Caribbean, whatever, and bring the oil up. First of all, we had to supply the civilian population with oil to keep them warm. The East Coast, most of their heat is by oil on it. So this would be part of it. We had to take it. Well, in their wisdom of arming this Gold Heels, they thought, well, we better put some machine guns on this. So up on the bridge goes 2 World War I 30 caliber Lewis machine guns. And they think, well, we ought to put some protection up there for those guys. So they built some gun tubs to protect those machine gunners. And in their wisdom, they put these tubs up so high that we couldn't aim the machine guns down onto the water. So if a submarine had surfaced, there was nothing that we could do about it except shoot those up, I guess, and hope they would land down or something. I don't know what else we could have done with them. So sometimes when we have Rummy and the rest of them making all of our decisions, we hope they would get out there and get their feet wet a little bit and get some practical experience before they would tell us that this is the way everything's going to go. So thank goodness we didn't have to do anything with that one. Never had a submarine surface on us or anything of the kind in the whole time that I ran that one. And each time we would come down, it was funny. We always went to a different port to pick up the oil, always went to a different port to drop it off. So you got to see a lot of different places even at that time. One of the things that sticks in my memory a little bit, by the way, we did not wear that Navy uniform. That was issued to us when we enlisted. But for working and everything else, we bought our own stuff. We had dungarees, whatever. But when you went ashore, if you wanted to get into some of the USOs and things, to say, remember, we didn't know we weren't military. So I would stick that uniform on, and I sailed in and out of New York quite a few times, and the stage door canteen was run by USO. And this was one of their big ones. All of the actresses and actors and everything would come to the stage door canteen for the service people. My claim to fame is I got to dance with Miriam Hopkins. So that's one of the benefits of having the uniform, was that you get to dance with it. And at that time, Miriam Hopkins was one of the top blonde actresses, so we had a lot of fun out of that one. Anything on the coast, Germany was in complete charge. 1942 up till past the middle of 43, Germany was in complete charge of the Atlantic coast. We had nothing to stop them. So any of the ships that were going there were really in danger at any time. During the period of 1942 to past middle of 1943, German submarines actually sunk 1,245 ships off the Atlantic coast. None of this was ever publicized in the papers back then. They did not want the American public or us guys to really know how bad things were that were going on at that time. Panic would have set in. Look what we got with Iraq right now, because we've got 3,000 people killed in the whole time that we've been over there. Can you imagine what would have happened if that same publicity would have gotten out at the time? American people probably would have said, let's fold our tents and go home. So that's what, nothing was ever publicized about any of this, and they didn't want us people to know how bad this was. We could see them burning as we would be going on our voyage, but you couldn't stop, because if you did, you became a target. So they said, keep moving, we will get them somewhere or another. The only thing that finally stopped that was the blimps. When they finally developed blimps, then they could stay up in the air 24 hours a day. Well, then the Germans just couldn't surface, because the blimps could even see the shadows up and down there and drop the depth bombs. So that's when Germany then changed their tactics and started what they called wolf packs to go after the convoys. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But to show you how blasé some of them were, they wouldn't, the people wouldn't black out the coast. Now, merchant ships traveling coastal waters have to, there's only a certain path that you can take. The Gulf Stream runs from the south on up to the north, up into Newfoundland, up that way. When no ship going south wants to go against that, because it just takes too much fuel to do that, so you would move into shore to get away from that and come down. The submarines knew that, so they would just sit there. And at nighttime is when most of the attacks would occur. At nighttime, they would simply sit there, and the ships were silhouetted against the lights in the coast. Virginia Beach in particular said, we don't want to turn our lights out, it'll hurt the tourist trade. Now this is in the middle of a war. So it took quite a while to get them to finally black out, and we get a little relief that way. Many of the German subs then moved a little further south, down into the Caribbean, And they had very friendly people down there. They could resupply their ships in the Brazil, things of that kind. We were so pressed for people to man these ships that I had gotten off of one ship and I was in Philadelphia. I told them I was ready to go out again. And they said, well, we've got a new tanker coming out of the shipyards down in Wilmington, Delaware, and we don't have anybody who knows how to steer this thing out of the Delaware River. So they sent me down to steer this thing out. And we did. And its maiden voyage was to take it down to the Caribbean, where the Germans were still pretty active. They had been active enough down there that they would surface, and they shelled Curacao, the German, Holland owned Curacao, and Aruba, and they would surface and shell those ships in there. And as a little bit of trivia, if you can ever remember, if anybody ever asks you when was the last time that a foreign nation fired on continental United States. And of course everybody's going to come up blank on this because it didn't publicize this either. But a German submarine in 1942 surfaced off of Miami and fired 2 rounds from their deck guns down the main street of Miami. They didn't kill anybody, and that's why it didn't make the newspapers or anything of the kind, but we were sailing back and forth, and of course the people would tell us about these things down there. But that's a bit of trivia that you might remember for your history class. That particular voyage, I can remember. Again, I was at the wheel. I was standing the 12 to 4 watch. I guess the way we did it, we were on watch for 4 hours, off for 8 hours, and back on for 4 hours again. So I had chosen the 12 to 4 watch. And it was probably about 3 o'clock in the morning sometime, but anyway, a beautiful night down in the Caribbean. And the ship was so new that we had torpedo detectors on it. These are simply green on this side, red on this side. If a torpedo is coming towards the ship, this will pick up the vibrations of the propeller on that torpedo and will set it off to tell you which side this is coming from. Well, of course, the minute this thing went off, green, my instructions were you wheel the thing over, hard over, so you present the stern, which would give them a very small target, and that's what you are presenting to the torpedo. And of course, I did this, and we rang her up. This was a pretty good ship, by the way. We could do 21 knots. That's pretty fast for a ship. And it was such a beautiful moonlight night that after we came off watch, the lookout aft, as we went into the mess room, he said, "Hey, Mac, that was a pretty good job you did." He says, "I saw the wake of that torpedo go by over there." He says, "It missed us by about 12 feet. So you think, okay, maybe I was lucky and helped save a few lives on the thing. As I said, they were sinking them so fast that the only way we were going to win this war was to build those things faster than they could sink them. And that's what started this Liberty ship program in World War II. Before the war, it used to take 244 days to construct a ship. By the time, let me just paraphrase something just a moment. If you remember Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto, the Japanese admiral who set that thing up, after it was all over, he said, "We have awakened a sleeping giant." Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened. To build ships fast enough that they couldn't sink all of them, it went from 244 days, which was the original time to build that ship, to 42 days. They were turning out, each shipyard was turning out one of those things every 42 days. Now, where are you going to get the people to man these things? I say there was an original merchant marine that probably weren't over 5,000, 6,000, maybe at the most on them. And here we are building those ships that fast, and that's where they were looking for us young guys to come in and man these things, and that was what happened. The Liberty ship became I think it was Churchill, it might have been Churchill, I don't remember, that said that's the ship that won the war. Actually it was, not because it had any battle capability, but because there were so many of them that they were able to carry so much material into Europe and the Pacific theaters that it simply overwhelmed the enemy. We got more people, more stuff over there than they could destroy, and that's what it was. We didn't do the actual fighting as such. We got them in there, and as a matter of fact, when I went up to we went to the dedication of the World War II Memorial, and the Army veterans of the Battle of the Bulge were having their reunion in the same hotel we were staying at. So I just told them, I said, I took you guys in there. I said, but you know, you were the guys who had to slug it out. I was the one that took you in, landed you on the beach, and then said, the enemy's that way, get going. I'm going back and get some more of you guys. So that was our job, was to get them over there. Actually, as I pointed out, I participated, took soldiers in for 3 of the invasions. These were in Anzio, which might have been one of the dumbest campaigns of World War II that ever came about. For those of you who don't know, Anzio is just above Naples and below Rome. Now, at any time, we could have bypassed this because the terrain was such. We took these soldiers into the beach, and where the Germans sitting about 300 or 400 feet up on top of the hill on Monte Cassino, and all they're doing is just shooting straight down at everything that comes in there. But Winston Churchill said, I want an invasion of Anzio. So they went ahead with a terrible loss of life in that one. That was not one of the highlights of World War II. It was successful, but only because of the Army guys who just made it successful in spite of the terrible loss of life on it. As I said, when I said the Navy would like to have gotten a hold of the Merchant Marine, but they couldn't, and there were several reasons. One was the personnel who existed at the time. The other was there weren't enough people to man those ships if you did it on the Navy. That Liberty ship was 441 feet long. The deck crew on that, and even here I'm being generous, says 18 people because it showed the captain and of course first, second, third mate. And for this it listed as a crew 2 cadets. In all the ships I was on, there was never a cadet on there. There just weren't enough people. We had a radio operator, a carpenter, a bosun, 4 able-bodied seamen, and 3 ordinary seamen. This radio operator, there was no medical facilities at all on merchant ships. We were just out there. So the radio man would act as the purser who would dispense if you had a medical problem. So he had a supply of aspirin and stuff of that kind. And he would give you this, and that's what you went away with. To show you how bad it could be, one of the ships I was on, I was about 2 weeks out coming into Norfolk, and I developed an abscess molar. We have no facilities on board to take care of this thing. I get into Norfolk at 7 o'clock at night, and I start looking for a dentist. The one I finally found open at that hour, he said, I don't have gas. He says, and Novocaine isn't going to do one thing on that. I said, Doc, nothing could hurt worse than what I have been going through for 2 weeks. Will you please pull that thing out? So he pulled it out with no anesthetic. That's what I mean when I say no medical facilities. That's what those guys went through out there. Whatever problems they had, you had to solve them by yourself. There was nothing you could do about it. So you got your teeth pulled or whatever had to be done. This Liberty ship was very slow. Its top speed was 13 knots. Remember the tanker I told you was 21 knots, which is pretty fast. The Queen Mary does about 28 knots. This thing does 13, is a round bottom deck. And when you heard the expression, he's a drunken sailor, us guys weren't near as drunk as we looked. What it is, you developed a weird walk because of the way that ship, it pitched this way, then it would roll that way, then it would roll that way, then it would come back up again. So you developed a very funny walk all the time. But when you hit shore after having been on that thing for 30 or 40 days on it, and you hit shore, there was no way you were going to quit walking like that. So you'd be walking down the main street of whatever town you were in, and you're waddling down the street like that, and they think there goes another drunken sailor. It shows you how many myths there are about things. So, but the Liberty ship was built so fast and so cheap that if it made one voyage and dropped its cargo over there, even if it got sunk on the way back, they said it paid for itself. So it actually was a ship that won the war. I guess I need to tell you about the worst I ever saw. I just saw ships. See, the thing about it, when you're on a ship and you see somebody else burning out there, you know, it's one of these things, you poor guy, I feel sorry for you, but it ain't gonna happen to me. That was always the way you felt about it. That's what kept you going. They were gonna hit somebody else, but they weren't gonna hit you. I was in convoy, and we were in the Mediterranean, still in convoy. So we couldn't get through to Murmansk anymore. It was too dangerous. The Germans were in such complete control. The last convoy that we sent up Murmansk way had 37 ships in it, and 11 of them got through. The rest of them went down. One thing I want to ask you, come Memorial Day or anything of the kind, if you go to the cemetery or any of the things, don't just think about those who have headstones out there. Think of those that are still under the water out there who never made it back. Because convoy, we were in the Mediterranean, the last air raid that the Germans ever made on an Allied convoy was April the 20th of 1944. There was a troop ship, and we were in the second row. Troop ship was also in the second row. So we moved this troop ship over into the third row. We come out to the end and kind of tighten it up because we want to protect this troop ship. We had seen an observation plane that morning and knew it would happen. That evening, just at dusk, a squadron of German planes come out of the mountains. We're just off Sicily and off of Algiers. They come out, and the first ship they want is this troop ship. 188 goes in there, drops one torpedo, hits that ship, and this is what's left of it. And that's all that is left of it. Because in their wisdom of loading that troop ship, not only did they have 580 enlisted personnel on that ship, along with the crew, but they also had a hold full of ammunition. And that's what that torpedo hit, was that hold that was loaded with ammunition, and that ship simply disintegrated alongside of us. It showered all of us with debris, of course, but again, these are the things you think of. Who was the smart guy who said, let's put ammunition and troops together on this thing? But that's the way that ship went up. There was absolutely nothing left of it. In that fray, we knocked, when I say we, I'm talking of all the ships that are shooting, knocked down knocked down 5 of their airplanes, but they got 3 of our ships, including this one, and that's not a very fair exchange. We lost a heck of a lot more. So to say, when you go to the cemeteries for memorial services, there's the crew plus 580 men who are still at the bottom of the Mediterranean someplace on it. So remember those people when you get out there. Now, we had, on that ship, we were heading for Iran. We had, all of our supplies at that point were for the Russians. As I say, we couldn't get through to Murmansk anymore, so the only way we could do it was through the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal, up the Persian Gulf, unload in Iran, down a little burg called Karamshar. And then they would load the stuff on trains and ship it up through Afghanistan and into Russia. That's when everybody was friendly over there at the time that we could do that. So that's why we were on the way with that stuff. I might say, if we think we're going to make a democracy over there out of these people, I was in Iran, and while we were there, we thought we might as well. We were pretty close to Basra, up in Iraq. So what to do? Just hitch a ride on up into Basra, into the marketplace and things of that kind. Those people don't like us. They didn't like us back in 1944. And I don't think there's anything that has brought about any change in that situation since then. They tolerated us. We brought money and things of that kind, so they tolerated us, and that was as far as it went. The only, when we came back on it, the only place that I ever saw any thanks, we were now up in Naples, Italy. Our job, now that we had delivered that stuff to the Russians, is to carry troops and supplies that we had that had been unloaded previously and for the African campaign. Now we're to take all of this stuff further north from Africa up to, in this instance, Italy at this time. So we're taking troops and ammunition and things that kind of, and we're going up to Naples. I might tell you know, maybe everything isn't serious during wartime. I might tell you, we were in Oran, and a contingent of Arab troops are going to be taking up into the Italian theater. So we look at them, and so they come marching on, and about 20 of them, I guess, 20 to 25. One woman. 24 soldiers, one woman. Whoa, we don't have any orders that we're to have women on these ships. What are we going to do? So everything comes to a halt. Well, they had French officers, so they come along and they explain, well, this is the way Arabs travel. They have one squad, one woman, one squad, and says, and they service all of this. And we thought, well, at this time, it's better not to go into details as to what service of the soldiers meant. So we dropped that and said, get on board. This ship happened to be equipped with smoke detectors. And of course, the worst thing in the world is fire on board a ship, mostly if it was out in the water. But here we are tied onto the dock. But anyway, the smoke detectors on the bridge go off like a Christmas tree. Everything is lit up. Go running down to find out what it is. And these women, for these soldiers, they don't like our food. So they're going to fix their own. And they're building charcoal fires down in the hold of this ship. And they're going to cook food of whatever the Arabs eat on it. They're going to cook all this. Well, we had to bring that to a halt pretty quick because the next day we're going to be out at sea and there ain't going to be any open fires on board that ship. So they either learn to eat what we got or go hungry. It's their choice. Anyway, we got them up there. While I was in Naples, and as I said at the beginning, one of the nice things about it is us guys got to see an awful lot of the world and the country. While we're in Naples, we decide we'd like to go down to Pompeii and see what that looks like. So somebody gets a hold of an army truck, and we're on our way, and this is about noon. An Italian family comes out and waves us down. Nothing would do, but we would come in and eat the noon meal with them. Now these poor folks had little or nothing. But what they had, they wanted us to share it with them. The only thing I remember, they did have lovely potatoes cooked in olive oil, and that's the only thing I remember of that thing. But their remarks were...
Did you have red hair?
Their remark was, you don't know how glad we are to see the Americans. You don't know how bad the Germans treated us. That's the only family in the whole time that I was in that ever thanked us for being in their country to save them on it. I have been in France, Italy, and some more to come on it. We did take from Naples, we took the soldiers that had fought the Italian campaign. We're now going to make the invasion of France. So we've loaded them on, and we take them on in, and they, here again, I'm not certain who was the smart one on this, but anyway, now these are veterans who have fought. They are not cowards, but as the German airplanes are up there, and in this instance, the Navy anti-aircraft fire is keeping them pretty high. But I remember one of them saying, Mac, where do you dig a hole? Because these guys are used to foxholes. I said, don't worry about it, guys. I said, number 5 is loaded with 500-pounders back there. I said, if one of them happens to hit that, I said, the hole is already dug for you and you won't have to worry about it. Thank goodness none of the Germans could get low enough. The anti-aircraft fire kept them up there. The most dangerous thing was the German 88s that would fire from shore, and they are a very awesome weapon. They whistle when that shell comes through, and you can hear it, and it really screams. So, but we took them in, was successful. We then loaded up with some German prisoners to take them back to the prison camps in Africa. And the GIs didn't particularly like the canned stuff, the K rations and the C rations and everything. But our only facilities for carrying troops was steam tables down in number 2 hold. So that's where we had them down there, and we would just dump that stuff down in there and heat it up for them. As much as our GIs didn't like it, they said, you know, that's the best food we've had in 3 years. So it's all different as to what is going on. We did get those prisoners delivered. But just one of on our ship, they were guarded by these big Senegalese guys who just love to, they would guard with a bayonet on their rifles. They would stand up there. Well, this one was one of Hitler's Aryan guys, real macho, and our lines were wet, so I was up there working to flake them out, to dry them out, and this one got up off of the hold and was coming at me. I think he would have thrown me overboard if he could have got to me. So I just hollered, "Whoa, help!" Well, you should have seen that big black guy coming down there, and he had that rifle coming like that. And you know, I never saw that German after that. He headed for the hold, and for the 3 days that we were at sea, I never saw him again. I think they put the fear into him a little bit. Having been over there for quite a while, we then came back, got off in Charleston. I got off in Charleston and headed home, and those of you who saw that picture that I sent around of her, that picture has been completely around the world, by the way. I had that above my bunk all the way. So we thought, well, having nothing else to do, why don't we get married while I'm on the way? So we did. We came back to Cincinnati. Betty and I married in November of 16 of 44. And then I said, well, my leave is up, but I want to see the Pacific. So I went down to New Orleans to take a ship. As luck would have it, that ship still had about 2 weeks' work that had to be done on it. So I just told her, I said, get on a train and head down here. So we had another 2 weeks of honeymoon down in New Orleans. We have very nice memories of New Orleans. Much better than Katrina.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. We left New Orleans Christmas Day, 1944. Headed out and on down to go through the canal. Just as a little aside, things were a little bit different back then as far as acceptance of people. I guess you couldn't do this now, but we had just left the harbor and we're heading down when one fellow on board, a homosexual, made an advance on one of the people. You didn't accept that, particularly as small as our crews were. This would have been extremely disrupting. Mm-hmm. They dropped him off Panama City, down in Panama, and I have no idea what happened to him from that point on. But now this leaves us shorthanded, so everybody has to pick up. This is not like the Navy, who has 35 men on one line. We didn't. As I say, we only had a total of 15 men on the deck. So now we're all doing double duty. Anyway, we steam over to New Guinea, and that fighting is over there. We pick up the 37th Division from Ohio. We are going to make the invasion of the Philippines. So we head up there. One of the signs is in there, the liberation of Manila in February. So we put them in, and our area is Lingayen Gulf, which is on the island of Luzon. The Navy did a great job. The bombardment of Lingayen Gulf was greater than the combined bombardments of all of the beachheads in Europe at that time. You talk about the 4th of July, man, when this stuff goes up there. So actually there was very little resistance because of it, of that bombardment on it. So landing was not particularly hard. We unloaded the soldiers, started unloading their supplies. In this instance, by the way, this was one of them where we were carrying beer. In number 2 hold, we had a whole load of beer. A lot of other stuff, of course, but I just happened to remember that one. And anyway, we take the soldiers off, and one of them says, Mac, if the captain will let you go, says, why don't you ride down to Manila? Says, that's our job. We're going down to liberate Manila. Says if there's any snipers, you just jump off the truck in the ditch till we take care of them. So that's what we did. Headed on down. If you pick up any history books, I've got one at home, says War in the Pacific. This guy never was over there. He says, oh boy, Manila was a devastated city. No, it was not. The Japanese simply withdrew and left Manila as an open city. The only shooting going on in Manila was some small arms fire in the St. Thomas prison where they were holding some of our GIs prisoner, and there was some small arms fire over there. Other than that, there was no real fighting in Manila. So then I went back up then, of course, got back up on the ship, and then went around to Manila and unloaded the rest of our stuff. Then we had to head for Australia to pick up some more to bring the stuff back up there. This is where it got just a little bit harder work. I had signed on to this ship as what they call the carpenter or deck maintenance man. See, when our designations, if you were an ordinary seaman, that means you're a rookie. You're just coming out to learn the thing. If you're an able-bodied seaman, you have taken all the tests that they have to issue your special license so that you can do all of the work that has to be done on board ship, whether it is raining, pitch of night, or whatever. If there's anything that has to be done, you have to steer the ship, you have to do every bit of it. So I'd signed on because I didn't want to stand watch. I thought I did it because as deck maintenance, I would just work 8 hours, an 8-hour shift, and then I could sleep or play all night, whatever you wanted to do. When I say play, the only thing you played on ship, you either played pinochle or cribbage. It took a lot of time to complete either game, so you would play those two games for the most part. Very seldom do we ever play poker. It went too quick. So anyway, we get into Brisbane, Australia, and one of our guys on the deck crew, he gets a snootful, and he decides he wants to take on the first mate. And he does. He busts him a couple of times. Well, that gets him taken off and put in the can. Now, who has to take his job? Now I got 2 jobs. Now I have to take care of the deck. Now I have to stand watch on it. Again, this is where the Navy would have had an advantage on it. When it came time to tie up a ship, for example, they have about 35 men pulling on a line. We have a steam winch over here. We have pulling the hawsers, putting it on there so that you're winching that ship into the dock. And once you get it up there, somebody has to go over to that bit and throw a small line on it, put a special knot on that thing, and say, okay. And then they can throw it off of the winch, and then that'll hold long enough that you can then take the 6-inch hawser and wrap it around the bits and tie the ship up. That was one of the reasons they made me do that. I was an able-bodied seaman. I was the only guy on our watch who knew how to tie that knot on that thing so that you could take that thing up, because you had to be able to throw it right back off again once it was on there, because you didn't want that little line trying to hold anything. It just wasn't big enough. So we have left Australia, shorthanded again, back up to Manila. This is our job. We're going to resupply them. Then from there, we were over at WWII. We were refueling. Again, all of this fuel that's at WWII, one of our ships has brought it in there before. We're going to use some of it. We've been over there long enough that we are short of fuel. All those ships ran on oil, not on coal. So we're at WWII, and our radio man comes on and said, they have just dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. We thought, At that time, we didn't know what it was. But then the captain started to explain to us, and he said, fellas, it looks like the war might be over. And that's what they said. They said, you guys have been over here long enough, head for home. So there we are for home. And for the most part, wasn't too bad. But let me tell you, some of the ships that were lost in the war were not all enemy action. You know, a ship has to go 24 hours. Doesn't make any difference what the weather is. If it's hurricane, monsoons, whatever it is, that ship keeps going. Well, we ran into one of those things, and let me tell you, it was pretty bad. We also ran into a hurricane off of the Atlantic coast one time, and I was at the wheel, and we couldn't make any headway against it. There's a saying, you know, that if they could move the water back at Cape Hatteras, you could walk from the ocean to the shore on the masts of all of the ships that are sunk off of Cape Hatteras. Anyway, we couldn't make any headway. The captain says, Mac, can you ease it off a little bit so we can go out to sea and run this thing down? I tried to ease it, you know, couldn't ease it, and it went like that. Had we not been loaded with oil, that ship would have capsized. It was bad enough, it was about 4:30, and it went over like that. The steward came running up. He says, what in the hell is going on up here? He says, you just threw all of the supper all over the deck. And of course, the captain was a little bit upset, and they used a little strong language to tell the steward to get off of his bridge, and till we could get that thing up. We had gone over so far that had we not been loaded with oil, as I said, we would have capsized. When we finally got it up and looked, our lifeboats on that side were full of water. We had gone over that far on the thing. So a lot of ships were not just enemy action, you had also had that action, and you had to keep going at all times. So, come back through the Panama Canal. We tie this ship up in Texas City. Captain says, as I'm getting off, he says, Mac, you going to sail as my bosun on my next one? And I said, Captain, 9 months ago, before I got on this thing, I got married, and the war is over. Your chances of getting me back on one more ship just went down the drain. And I came home and started my family with Betty McCroskey, and that's the end of my story. I'm sorry, it is not the end of my story. There's one other thing I'm going to ask you to do. There is, as I told you, we were not recognized as veterans. We didn't know this. There is a bill in Congress right now. The House has approved it, and it is sitting in the Senate. Senate Bill 1272, which, if they will get us out of the Veterans Affairs Committee, would give to the surviving merchant mariners $1,000 a month. That's all. We got no GI benefits of any kind on it. We did get paid a little bit more than the sailor, but only while I was on ship. I got nothing when I was off ship. It wasn't that we got paid 30 days. We paid all of our transportation. We paid all of our own clothing, everything. We would like to get this bill out of the Senate. If any of you are so inclined to do so, I would like you to take this and write it. In this instance, we have two senators, Bunning and McConnell. Of course, Mitch is busy raising money, and I have no idea what Jim Bunning is doing because I'm not certain he knows right now. He's a little bit out of it. I knew Jim, by the way, when I used to live here. He ran a baseball team, and I was in the baseball umpire. But if you will take this and write to your senator, asking them to take some action on this, I would appreciate it. But that's the end of my travels during that time. There were some things that were said. said, had these ships not been produced, the war would in all likelihood have been either prolonged many months or would have been lost, one or the other. It takes 7 to 15 tons of supplies to support one soldier. The merchant marine lost 1 out of every 26 men. This was the highest percentage of casualties of World War II, more than the Marines even. But that was the way it was. And as I say, we didn't know these things at the time and really didn't care, because we were out there to do a job that we had signed up for, and we did it, and I think it was done very well to get things done. So that's all I can say. If anybody has a question, I'll be glad to answer them.
Did the Liberty ships carry Higgins boats to deliver the troops to shore, or how did they get them ashore?
The way they got to shore, this doesn't show it too well, but you will see the Liberty ship is sitting right here on the horizon. Then the Navy, or Coast Guard, whichever it happened to be, what they call these landing crafts, either LSIs or LSTs. If it's an LST, it means it's going to carry a tank. And these are very shallow draft. They wouldn't draw over 2 feet of water. Of course, they don't have much ocean-going capability because they're not built for it. But we would transport those, and we would unload these. The soldiers would go down with nets that we hung over the side, and they would get into either these ducks, which were simply an amphibious truck, or an LSI, which would be down alongside, and they would get into that. And this is the merchant ship right here, and this is the landing craft right in this area. We would be, I would say at the most half a mile offshore unloading, because you had to have them close enough to get everything off quickly, so that we could then pull back without being in any further danger. So they would unload them as quickly as they could, and then the cargo ship would then leave, and those would go over, and then we would either stay there if we had cargo. We would unload them into these ducts, and if there was a place we could get in, like, so say after we unloaded a lot of stuff up in Lingayen and then came back to Manila, for example, that was the finish unloading. You unloaded the immediate supplies that they needed right on the beach. And then after that, if they could survive it, then you just took everything to where there was a permanent landing facility, because you could unload this stuff so much quicker. Once you tie it up to a dock, you can get it off much quicker.
Thank you.
So in the 4 weeks of training, did you learn to pilot the ship then, or did you learn once you got on board?
The only training you got in that 3 days at sea, that big wheel there is the wheel on the yacht Bima. So what you learned was how to steer by compass. You had to, they would tell you to steer 183, for example. Well, you had to pull this thing around and hold it on 183. Steering a ship is very hard because you can't stop it. Once a ship starts to swing, if you say, well, I'm going to stop it on 183, it'll probably go down to about 320 before you can get it stopped. So what you have to do is anticipate the feel of that ship in the water so that it starts to swing. Then at a certain point, you'll bring the rudder back again to stop the bow of that ship and line it up on it. Again, everybody didn't learn it. I guess I was lucky. I did have a good feel for steering a ship and was able to do it. That's why for that one, then and when we brought that ship back, we had taken that load of oil up to Halifax, Canada, and we came back through the Cape Cod Canal. I've been through all of the major canals in the world, By the way, if you ever have a chance to go through the Panama Canal, what an awesome thing this is, of lifting those ships from down here all the way up and out into the Pacific Ocean. What an engineering feat this was. That's the only canal that does that. The Suez Canal is direct, and the Cape Cod Canal is direct. And when we got to it, the pilot came on. There's always a pilot to come on board a ship to go into a port, except in the foreign nations. But the pilot comes on and he says, "Mac, you a good helmsman?" I said, "I'm as good a helmsman as you are a pilot. What do you want?" He says, "Aim at that bridge pier up there." And we did, and he rang that thing up, and he threw enough wash up on the side of that canal. It's a wonder they didn't take his license away. I mean, boy, we were really booking it through there. But anyway, I got the ship through. But that was the wheel on the Vima, and that's all that gave us the feel of how to anticipate the ship. The other thing they had us do, and this was to give us our sea legs, was to run up what they call ratlins. This is ladders, the rope ladders and everything, that go from this side of the ship across the yard arms back down onto this. And it made no difference how this thing was listing. You had to run up this one, walk across the yard arms, and back down the other one. This is to give you sea legs, so that you think, well, I'm infallible, I can do anything out there. That was the training we got. They had to get us out there so fast that they didn't have time to do anything. They said, "So you'll learn at sea," is, I guess, the way they felt about it. One other smart thing they did, by the way, on the Liberty ship, there's the wheelhouse right in front. You had to have one big mast that could lift 50 ton. So they built that thing right in front of the wheelhouse. Now, if you're in convoy, it doesn't make any difference if you're in open sea, but if you're in convoy, you want to see where that ship in front of you is. Well, if you're in the wheelhouse, you can't see that ship in front of you because somebody built that mast right up in front of it. So now what they have to do, now we have what they call a flying bridge. That's up on top of the bridge, and this is wide open. This is where we had to go to steer a Liberty ship, was up on the flying bridge, and the only thing we had, they had just stitched some canvas around up about this high. Can you imagine going through the North Atlantic in that, and it's raining? You stand up there on that, you've got all of your clothes on, you've got your rain gear on and everything else, trying to stay warm on that thing, and you've got to be at that wheel for 2 hours, and you can't deviate. They've given you the course that you have to be on, and you have to hold it no matter what the weather is or anything of the kind. It was cold up there. That's why fatalities, for one thing, were very high. At Hoffman Island, that's one thing they did teach us, and that's when I got wondering a little bit, you know. It seemed to me that we spent an awful lot of time on dead reckoning navigation, which means once you're in that lifeboat or that raft, you got to figure how to get it from here to here, and you've got no compass. So that's called dead reckoning. And the other thing, they taught us how to abandon ship, and even gave us rubber suits to go down in case there was burning oil or something of the kind. I thought, you know, we're spending an awful long time on dead reckoning and abandoning the ship. There might be something wrong with this picture a little bit. But that was the way it was. It was wartime. They got to get the job done. It got done.
Do you know how many Liberty ships total were built? The town I'm from, South Pole, Maine, produced a lot of them.
I might have that information. Let's see here. Build those so quickly. Everything was prefabricated someplace else and brought to the shipyards and just stuck in there. And that's the Perry. I may not have that one.
You can look it up on the net.
think I can find that one. It's something like 700 or something, as I remember, on it. But there were over 700 Liberty ships that were built. Well, then following that up, because that thing was so slow, then they followed up with what they called a victory ship. And that was the one that was a little bit faster, like this one. That's a victory ship. Was much faster. And actually, that's what I went to the Pacific on, was a victory ship. In the Atlantic side, I was on Liberties, and on the Pacific side, I was on a victory ship.
Did you ever get attacked in the Pacific by the kamikazes?
Actually, the Germans did not do kamikaze, they did bombing. As I say, this last one they did, again, what they do, first of all, the gunners on merchant ships were very inexperienced. They were shoved on there just as fast, and there weren't enough of them. As a matter of fact, I was made a pointer on a 4.5 inch because they just didn't have enough people. And what gunnery practice did I have other than shooting squirrels back here? And so they pressed us into service on it. And, but the Germans did not do kamikaze, and the Japanese, I did not see any. I never saw a Japanese airplane. We had torpedo attacks, but no airplane attacks.
There were 2,751 Liberties built between 41 and 45.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But that was the extent, and this is pretty typical of most of everybody in the merchant marine. There wasn't much difference in them. I never got to Murmansk, as I say, because that was the voyage right ahead of me. And they said that we can't stand that loss to lose that many. So that's why we were taking stuff through the Persian Gulf to get to them. And this was pretty typical of the way the merchant service operated during World War II, and they have never received the recognition because it was a jealousy type of thing. As a matter of fact, you know, even up to this time, Reagan, I was not a veteran until President Reagan declared it so. But do you know, up till this time, the VFW would not accept me as a member if I want to join, because they said I was not a member of the uniform service on it. Yet most of the Merchant Marine were veterans long before everybody else was on it. And that was what kept out. Roosevelt simply died too soon to get the job completed that he had talked about. He did have a bill ready to give full recognition to everybody who came in, because they were all like me, 19, 20 years old on it. We weren't these old guys on it. Those guys were gone very early in the war. They got sunk first. And, as a matter of fact, of all the ships I was on, I only recognize what you call 2 old-timers. The rest of them were guys like me that on-the-job training, get out there and do it and hope you do it right, and if it works, fine. And that's the way the Merchant Marine was operating, with numbers more than anything, and as I say, with what you call skeleton crews, because we were able to man those ships with minimum people on them. As I say, for example, on the deck, including the officers, we've got 16 men to do that whole job, 4.5 inch. I never thought to get any earplugs. I was sleeping and I went running out there, get out there. Whatever is in the water, I don't know. It's an object. Whether it's a submarine or what, I don't know. Over on this side of the barrel is a guy who lines it up for this way. And the pointer over here lines it up for perpendicular. Well, once his lines and your line lines up over here, you pull the trigger. Well, we got them lined up, and I fired that thing. And that muzzle blast came back, and I thought it tore that right ear off of there when it came back. But VA says, no, it's just because you're getting old, Bill. But anyway, they gave me the hearing aids. So that's the story. Some of them, as I say, some things you just remember, and that was one of them on it. And that's all I can think of to add to the.
Mr. McCroskey, I'm so glad you all stopped in that day. We weren't ready yet, you know, and I took the time to talk to you. And thank you so much for coming back today. You really enjoyed it.
I hope you all take the story, and if you know anybody who thinks that we were draft dodgers, I didn't go in because I was a draft dodger. I go in because I wanted to see the world.
There you go.
There you are, Dad. Dad,
Grandpa, Bill,
there you are.
Your hair's that's a pretty old picture.
lots changed.
I look like in 1942.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on History with Smiley, and remember your history and heroes who have fought bravely for the freedom you enjoy today. We'll see you next time on History with Smiley. Thanks for watching.